Hello and welcome to another Arsecast Extra, as always, with James from Gunnerblog. James, a very goodly morning to you.
Goodly morning, Andrew. How you doing?
Great. I'm great. Had a fab weekend, I have to say. Watched Arsenal win, watched other teams lose. Took a quick trip to Paris as well. By the by, if you know anybody looking for some jewellery for the missus for Christmas, just give me a shout. I can hook you up, you know.
Will do.
Good.
Did you actually go to Paris?
No, I didn't. No.
Oh.
I have to say that now. Cover my tracks.
Sure, you never know who's listening.
Exactly.
It's interesting because I've been filming a lot on Mondays. We've done a lot of sort of weekend records, right? So I think off the back of this game, people were like, "Where's the podcast?" You know, on Saturday night or Sunday morning. Where's the podcast, guys? We were just waiting. It would have been remiss of us to record the podcast before Aston Villa's defeat of Tottenham and Manchester United's defeat of Liverpool. We were simply biding our time.
Exactly. We showed patience. Patience, as they say, is a virtue, and that virtue was rewarded by a couple of results which were both hilarious and useful, I think, from an Arsenal perspective.
Brilliant results for us, I mean,
for sure.
Spurs one, I guess, probably less relevant to our ultimate position in the table, one suspects or hopes, but the Liverpool one, fantastic. And is it 4 now? 4 consecutive defeats?
4 in a row, apparently. 4 in a row.
It is a little bit reminiscent. I mean, I think it's a more spectacular implosion than when we lost our invincible streak, right? You had this team that was seemingly impervious, and then suddenly they lose a game and they're sort of scrabbling around trying to rediscover themselves. But I think our results were better than this in that period, and and also we had the same core of a team to fall back on. I think so much of their problem seems to be quite how much change there's been. Yeah,
we had a bit of a question, actually, seeing as we're talking about this, on the Discord from Jedders Maflunkify. He said, Liverpool have lost 4 games in a row in all competitions. I was struggling to think when Arsenal last lost 4 in a row. Do you know when this was? Here's the spoiler. Andrew, maybe you can ask this of James as a quiz question. Can you remember the last time Arsenal lost 4 in a row? Or did you look at this?
I've not looked at it.
Okay.
4 in a row.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man. I don't remember, Andrew.
Okay.
I'm going to hazard a guess. I mean, 4 in a row as an Arsenal fan would feel like an awful lot.
Yeah.
We're very lucky. We very rarely embark on that kind of run.
Will I tell you, or do you want to have a guess? I mean, it is,
I mean, honestly, the best I can do is 3 in a row, which was the start of 2021, right?
That's just 3 games.
It's just 3 games. 4, of course, is a whole different matter.
Absolutely.
No, you tell me.
I'll tell you, it's 2018, according to the answer here, where we lost in the Europa League to Östersunds 2-1. Then we lost the EFL Cup final to Manchester City 3-0. You remember that one? The Mustafi thing. God almighty. Then the next Premier League game was also against Manchester City, which we lost 3-0. And then we lost to Brighton 2-1. Apparently Arsene Wenger only lost 4 in a row twice, and Mikel Arteta has never lost 4 in a row. So there you go.
Wow, yeah. Well, that was the end, wasn't it, of the Arsene Wenger reign?
Yeah, it was very, very close to that, it has to be said. So look, a good weekend for us in terms of what other teams have done, and actually we'll go into a bit more detail on all the Premier League action this weekend in our episode of The 30 a bit later on this afternoon over on Patreon. We can, really delve into the chuckles and the laughs that this Premier League weekend threw up. But from our perspective, a 1-0 win away to Fulham put us back on top of the table and meant that we could not be overtaken. And, it's another one of those games, James, where last season we dropped points in this fixture, and this season we're well and truly up on what we did last season. It was, I think I said this before, I put it in the same bracket as the Newcastle away and the West Ham at home games, where you're looking for improvement. You're looking for, like, how do we do better than last season? And this was one of those games on paper that we certainly would have targeted in that respect.
Yeah, we've made up some points yet again. I think coming back from international duty, there's always that doubt in your mind about what sort of state will the team be in, how cohesive will they be, how fit will they be. And, we got the 3 points. I don't think it was kind of a classic or even a particularly vintage performance from this Arsenal team, but they got the job done, and that's what's required. And if you're going to win a Premier League, as we hope to do this year, there's going to be, probably 10 games like this one where you grind it out a bit. And it's interesting because the data is sort of very in our favour. Like, you look at the balance of play, the chances, the XG, the possession. This was a game which I think by most measures Arsenal really dominated. Equally, I think there was some sort of rustiness in the performance. I don't think it was a totally complete performance. And in some ways it's more satisfying when that's the case, to see that we came through unscathed and with 3 points in the
bag. I mean, I did think early on we gave Fulham a little bit of momentum, that there were a couple of uncharacteristic mistakes. Gabriel gave the ball away a couple of times. I think Eze lost the ball in midfield. And it gave Fulham maybe a little bit of, like I said, momentum. They had some attempts on goal, not an attempt on target, by the way, but attempts on goal. And in that first sort of 15 minutes, I had to remind myself a little bit, hey, you know what? This is the first game back after an international break, where typically the first half of games like this can be a bit sketchy or a bit scrappy or a bit, under par. There was part of me going, I hope we just turn up here and absolutely turn Fulham over and score a couple of early goals and everything's hunky-dory. But then you have to be realistic about, how many players were away, and a lot of Arsenal players were away on international duty. Gabriel, for example, went from London to Korea to Japan and then back from Japan to London. It's a lot of travel. Even if he didn't play that second game in Japan, it's still a lot of travel to undergo, albeit, in more luxurious fashion than, your average customer flying long haul. It's still a lot to contend with, and pretty much all of those players on the pitch were away on international duty and played international football during this time. So it was like, okay, I've got to sort of reset my mind a little bit here in terms of what I expect from the Arsenal performance. But I do think early on that sloppiness in possession just gave Fulham a bit of wind in their sails.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, there were 2 giveaways from Gabriel, maybe feeling the effects of that jet lag a little bit. Just some sloppy moments, uncharacteristically sloppy. And it's funny because the narrative coming out of this game, I think understandably, has all been about a clean sheet, another clean sheet, this amazing defensive record, no shots on target in each of the last 2 Premier League games, which is phenomenal, don't get me wrong. But I did think in that first half there were moments that could well have ended in a shot on target. Harry Wilson curling a couple wide and over, and, just little opportunities for Fulham to counter on us or break on us that offered a little bit of threat. They didn't really, I think make the most of those or weren't able to convert them. And actually, I thought the pattern over the first half sort of shifted in our favour. It was almost like the first half of the first half is when we looked a little bit ropey, but I think we began to find our rhythm. After 15 minutes, we obviously scored an absolute wonder goal, which was sadly offside.
Oh my God. Honestly, I mean, what a goal this would have been, because it's a long ball from Timber, from basically an advanced right back position, and a long diagonal ball which finds Trossard. Trossard's touch into the path of Calafiori is unbelievably good, and the finish is brilliant. It's just such a shame, isn't it? He was like a half a yard, not even half a yard, a few inches offside. It was a brilliant finish, but I thought the build up to it was incredible too.
Yeah, it was actually a bit like Buendia's goal for Villa.
Yeah. I mean, wow, what a goal that was! Fucking hell.
Like great a long pass, brilliantly brought under control, and then a really good sweeping finish. The strangest thing about it all that, I had absolutely no real sense of surprise when Calafiori whacked one in
from the centre forward position.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, yeah, okay, fair enough. The only surprise was he hadn't timed his run to perfection, but there you go. I thought after that moment, we began to threaten a little bit more and sort of start to control the game a bit better. And there were a couple of breaks in play, weren't there? A couple of lengthy breaks in play, which sometimes when you're the away team, that can help you. It sort of dampens the atmosphere.
Yeah.
They ended up playing, what was it, like 8 minutes of injury time or something, 6 minutes, something like that. So, yeah, I felt that sort of slowed any momentum that Fulham had generated or that we had granted them.
Yeah, and there were moments, I think, in that first half where, we perhaps could have done a little bit better in possession in the final third. Calafiori, I think, was our most dangerous player. He had a volley, didn't he, from a Saka cross, which went just far or just over the bar. It's like you say, you're not surprised when you see him pop up in the centre forward position, but you're also not surprised when you see him crack a volley over from the edge of the box. He's just such a threatening player and loves to get into positions where he can have a go at goal. What else was there in the first half? Like you said, there were a couple of stoppages, weren't there? But I thought towards the end of that first half, we were beginning to see how the game was going to play out, how the pattern of the game was going to go. And I think it was very much like last season where, Fulham are not a team who set out to park the bus in any way. That's not the way that they play. And last season, Arteta basically said that's how we made them play. And Marco Silva more or less agreed with that it was the domination of possession by Arsenal in the opposition half, which forced Fulham back. But you could see it, towards the end of the first half, or certainly as we began to assert our dominance, that Fulham sat with 11 men behind the ball. And that is, regardless of, who you've got on the pitch, it is a tough thing to contend with.
It is, yeah. And although it might not be the way they set out to play, most teams, I think, certainly at this level, when they collapse into that sort of shape, they're pretty difficult to break down. There's a certain security in that for them. And there were a couple of moments for Gyokeres, weren't there? I mean, one quite early on, he went through on the left-hand side and his cutback was a bit miscued, and then towards the end of the half he went through on the right, quite a tight angle.
I'm glad to see him shoot from there, though. I think those are the positions where, maybe he's been in those positions over the last couple of weeks and has not pulled the trigger instinctively. I think it was more instinctive this time. I know the angle was tight for that one, particularly in the first half where Leno made a decent save. But I think those are the things and the positions that he needs to get into with more frequency, and we need to get him into those positions with more frequency, because I think eventually, if you give him enough of those, he's going to find his range.
Yeah, I think the commentary actually on the feed I was watching might have said, would Arsenal have been hoping for Gyokeres to cut it back there? And I was like, absolutely not. That's not what we've bought him for. And even that one on the left foot in the early stages of the game, I almost thought to myself, I really want to see you hit it there.
Yeah.
Like, I know it's not your strong foot, but rather than going for the cutback, if the shot opens up, take it on. That's what we've bought you for, having that cutting edge in the final third. But yeah, I mean, there's an interesting game from him in some respects, because I thought his hold-up play wasn't best, but in terms of actually getting him in behind and having shooting opportunities at goal, we arguably did that better than we have done in a number of recent matches, and there were chances for him in both halves.
Yeah, for sure. There was a chance for Declan Rice towards the end of the half, which I absolutely could see hitting the back of the net.
Just whipped it wide of the post, didn't it?
Unfortunately not. Yeah, it was one of those where I think we've seen him score that kind of goal before, and it was a decent chance. I think that was right at half time. Second half, again, it was more like, Fulham sit back, we try and find a way through. I think we had a chance with Trossard at the back post where he sort of took a moment for the ball to come down and then dragged his shot wide. There was Saka going through. Do you remember that run he drove into the box?
Yeah, really good run.
Really good run. It sort of cleared, not quite off the line, but certainly close enough to going off the line. It was one of those where, when I looked at it again, if it had just sort of fallen in the right way, I think Zubimendi's there to just poke it home from close range, but it just sort of escaped his trajectory a little bit. But, you know,
Saka started to really turn it on, didn't he? I think they found it difficult to live with him.
Yeah. We'll talk about him after maybe we discuss, you know, the goal and how the rest of it played out, because I think he was just unbelievable in this game. There were corners. We started to build up the corners. There was one, I think, just before maybe when we scored. I don't know if that turned out to be a corner. There was a moment, wasn't there, where Gyokeres sort of turned his defender, and some people might have thought it was a penalty. I don't think it was a penalty. I don't think there was enough contact there. But then it was Gyokeres' presence in the box again, a smart little pass from Eze, and they put it behind for a corner. And from there, that's where we got the goal that won the game.
Yeah, and we got the delivery right this time. Great leap from Gabriel, who I think is smart enough to realise that, you know, I've just got to help this on towards goal.
Did you see Sky, by the way? Did you see Bukayo Saka on Sky?
No, I've not seen it.
Right, so they did the post-game interview with him where he's standing there with the microphone and, you know, he said, I took, you know, four rubbish corners and thankfully got this one right. And the guy said to him, why do you call them rubbish corners? And he just kind of went, did you see them? So
they weren't his best.
They weren't his best. You know, I was surprised, actually. The first corner of the game that we got was over on the other side. It was Declan Rice. And we took it short. And that was maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes towards the end of the first half. It was the first corner that we had. I'm all for a bit of variation, but I do think, you know, the first corner you have in a game like this against opposition that have been tricky in the past, it's like, just get it in there and see what kind of problems we can cause them. This time, it was a brilliant run from Gabriel, wasn't it? Flicked on and Trossard at the back post, as he generally is in these situations. You know, 99 times out of 100, the ball doesn't get there, but I can remember a couple of times where it has, and he's been in that position. That's kind of where he lurks.
Yeah, absolutely. 22 Premier League goals now for Arsenal, the same number as Kai Havertz and Laurent Koscielny. That's via Robinho. Bit of a poacher, isn't he?
Yeah.
He had the poacher's instinct there, and it was enough. And I think that set piece delivery and execution continues to be, whether Arne Slot likes it or not, a very potent weapon for this team.
Yeah. I think I have a question about that. So why don't we sort of park that discussion of set pieces and our prowess and how strong we are until we can get around to that question. But that meant obviously that Fulham had to come out a little bit. They had to play a little bit. We made changes pretty quickly after, or made a change rather pretty quickly after we scored the goal. So Mikel Merino came on to replace Eberechi Eze, who I don't think was brilliant on the night, but, you know, had some moments here or there. And I don't mean this to be like a referendum on Merino or anything like that. Was that a bit surprising to you, given the fact that Fulham were then going to have to come out and play a little bit, that we took off, you know, somebody who is ostensibly a more creative player for somebody who's more functional? I like Merino, by the way. I do like Mikel Merino. I think he's a really solid pro and can bring a lot to this squad over the course of the season. It just surprised me a little bit that, you know, with Fulham needing to get a goal, there might have been more space for Eze to operate in.
Yeah, I think I'd say I was a little bit maybe disappointed by that change, more so than surprised. I think Mikel Arteta is still Mikel Arteta, and I do think that he's a guy who, has a preference for a certain type of structure in his midfield. even disappointed is a bit of an overstatement, really. I just sort of was like, I guess I would have liked to have seen us maintain a bit more attacking threat. But Mourinho had a brilliant international break. I feel bad for him because, as you've just sort of intimated, in this conversation, it feels like, and in this ongoing debate, it feels like he catches a lot of flack. And it really is not intended in that way at all. Like, it's purely a kind of stylistic or personal preference thing. I think Mikel Merino is a really fine footballer. But yeah, I did think that was a bit odd, the speed at which he made that change. I thought if it was 10 minutes later, it would have made a bit more sense to me.
Yeah, same. But, he obviously made a decision. Ultimately, we've come away with 3 points. So hindsight being 2020, et cetera, it was just, to me, a little bit surprising that we might have...
And it was before Fulham changed as well, Yeah. So they brought off the injured Joachim Andersen for Diop, but they were getting Smith Rowe and Kevin ready. Adama Traore came on later too. But it wasn't as if they'd made those attacking changes and we were reacting to it. It was almost like we were changing in anticipation of something. Yeah,
or Mikel Arteta decided to change in reaction to the goal. Maybe he thought this was like a 1-goal game.
Maybe he did. And I could understand him having that instinct. And look, Eze didn't have a great game. I'm not, going to kid anybody about that. This wasn't his best game for Arsenal since joining. So what other options did he have if he wanted to change it? I guess the obvious answer is maybe Ethan Ranieri.
Yeah.
But he went with Merino, who's a guy in form. Fair enough, I guess. But it was a little bit... like I said, I think it was just felt a fraction early.
Sure. I get that. Bukayo Saka, who we talked about a few minutes ago, really started to drive this game from an Arsenal perspective. That run and shot that he had, Leno made a good save. Leno had a good game, by the way, I think. He made some good saves. So he had that shot. The way he made space to take that shot was superb. In the sort of inside left channel, he'd come over from the other side, which is something we're seeing maybe a little bit more from Bukayo Saka this season. I don't know if the sample size is very small, but I sort of have it in my mind that he's popping up in that area more than we have seen previously. Like, I know that's an area in which he can operate because I can remember him scoring goals from there. And I think one of the goals he scored this season is from that position. I can't remember the game. West Ham? Can't remember.
Right.
I don't know. But anyway, it was...
a recent one, wasn't it, where he finished in that inside channel,
and Leno made a good save. And then there was the penalty incident when Saka was deemed to have been fouled by Anthony Taylor, who pointed to the spot, but VAR decided that the penalty shouldn't stand.
Yeah.
I think we're, not miles apart on this one. And certainly when I looked at it on TV the other day, when I was doing the live blog and they showed replays, I was like, oh, that is not going to stand because he gets the ball. Like, he gets a touch on the ball. And I think I was trying to apply my own rule. Like, how would I feel if Timber had slid in and the touch on the ball was ignored? But I think there's something quite interesting about this. I know that your feeling is he gets a touch on the ball, it's not a penalty. Like, you wouldn't give that as a penalty.
I'm not. In the strictest application of the law, if you follow the letter of the law, then that doesn't have to be the case. They absolutely can choose to award a penalty. I'm merely saying, sort of, when I consider the application of the law, I'm not surprised this one was overturned.
See, this is one where I think, having watched it again, and this is where I think the discussion is quite interesting, because when I saw Anthony Taylor go over to the screen that didn't work, by the way, and then when it did work, it's like watching an old SD TV, right? He's seeing a replay of Kevin getting a touch on the ball. Subsequent to that, we have on Sky Sports, Bukayo Saka said, I know he gets a touch on the ball, but he got me first. this is one of those where I completely understand why VAR checks, because VAR checks everything, right? They're looking at everything through a fine tooth comb. What? That's ridiculous. I don't know what I'm saying.
They're not using that code correctly.
No, they're not. But the idea that something has to be clear and obvious, et cetera, as we all know, is absurd, because they look for any tiny thing that they can use to deny a penalty or a goal or whatever it is. And it's not just applicable to Arsenal, even though it feels that way. One of the replays that we saw on TV afterwards was really clear that before Kevin gets a touch on the ball, his knee makes contact with the knee of Bukayo Saka.
Yeah.
And I think if Anthony Taylor had gone to the screen and said, actually, yeah, he does get a touch on the ball, but he gets the man before he gets the ball, and that's a foul. I think that would be the correct use of VAR in this situation. But I think the technology available to the officials and referees is not the same as we're seeing after. So we got like a super slow-mo HD replay, right? Which informs our view of that incident. Whereas the referees are getting this kind of grainy footage that they have to look at while some little urchin was gurning away at him there, distracting him. And he's looking at it on a screen that doesn't work, and then all of a sudden it works, and then he's got this voice in his ear, and, it does create this kind of two-pronged narrative, if that's the way of putting it. Like, I kind of understand why Anthony Taylor, based on the footage that he saw and the information he was given, decided not to award the penalty. But I think subsequent to that, what we've learned is that that decision was wrong. So it's a weird one, isn't it, where there's this sort of post hoc analysis based on greater information that only emerges well after the fact.
But also, we don't know why he gave the penalty. So we don't know if he ever saw the knee. Do you know what I mean? Like, he might have given the penalty because he thought he tripped him and not got the ball.
Yeah.
And so then he's not going over to the screen looking for that. So, yeah, there's all sorts of possibility for things to fall through the gaps. I mean, I still think it's not a penalty. Like, I think if that was given against us, there would be murders. But I think the more interesting discussion actually is, like, should it be re-refereed?
Yeah. But everything is re-refereed. We can't have that discussion about, like, are they going to go into the minutiae of every incident that happens in a game? Because, yes, they are. Like, how many times do you hear during a game, oh, VAR are looking at something, maybe it's a foul on Gyokeres, oh, they've cleared it. You know what I mean? So every aspect of the game is being looked at all times, and we're aware of that from time to time because of what the commentators say, because the commentators, as we know, have got the VAR feed in their ears, or they can hear that, right? So they're aware that, like, a corner comes in, play goes up the other end, and they can hear VAR saying, well, we're just checking something here, might be a penalty, maybe a handball, blah, 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 blah. But that's the level to which the game is being re-refereed, for want of a better term. So the concept of clear and obvious is not relevant in any way.
No, and there's a different degree of scrutiny applied to different situations and decisions.
Yeah.
And so a penalty that's awarded on the pitch is definitely examined forensically in a way that something which isn't awarded on the pitch is not, in my view. Like, so that there are sort of like 50-50s where the referee doesn't blow that are kind of waved through quite quickly.
Yeah.
Whereas when an on-field decision is taken, there's like a huge interrogation of it. I guess because the PGMOL, so there's such anxiety about a decision being wrong, potentially.
Well, they do it with goals as well, don't they? They
exactly,
look for any possible reason to rule out a goal, and they will rule out the goal.
Yeah. And presumably it's because they are so conscious or concerned that those decisions have such swing impacts on games that they almost don't quite want to take ownership of it. I mean, presumably the reason they don't have access to the TV feeds is because they don't we speak regularly at the moment about how television coverage is increasingly biased, I suppose, or partisan. And I suppose they cannot risk the accusation that they're being steered by that. But it is interesting, like, given the level of coverage that we have, that the technology that they're using does seem to be inferior. Yeah,
stop using Nokia phones to film the VAR, please. Invest in some 8K cameras. I will just sort of slightly differ with you in terms of the penalty. Like I said, I can understand why it wasn't given or why it was overturned, but I also think that if he had stuck to his on-field decision, I don't think there could be too many complaints, because there is contact with Saka before there's contact with the ball. It changes from week to week whether a contact on the ball is relevant or not. If you're Nick Pope or you're Viktor Gyokeres or if you're Bukayo Saka or Kevin, whatever it might be. I just think it's one of those that if he'd gone to the screen and had the ability to see that replay in full and had said, actually, look, I can see he gets a contact on the ball, but he's kicked through the man first to get to the ball. Therefore, I think it's still a penalty. I don't know that Fulham could really complain too much, but look, it is what it is.
That's fair. I mean, but before everyone sends it to me, I have seen the clip of Howard Webb at some point on television saying about a decision. I'm not even sure which one it was originally. Well, the contact on the ball is not relevant. So look, they do change their tune according to which way the wind is blowing at that particular time. I'm more speaking in terms of like less the written law and more like what I see applied up and down the league. Like, I think, I think that I'm fine with that not being a pen. But I think the process and the degree to which on-field decisions are being re-refereed or are subject to revision or subject to the influence of an off-field official who is as subjective or as capable of missing something as the on-field guy. I do think that is a worthwhile and ongoing debate for sure. Yeah.
We did have moments, I think, where we could have scored a second goal, particularly late on. There was another shot from Gyokeres, wasn't there? And Martinelli on the rebound. Leno double save from Bernd Leno. But how did you feel? When it's 1-0, you're getting to 75 minutes, you're getting to 80 minutes, and it's like, well, we don't need to go for it. There's no point in us trying desperately to score a second goal and therefore leaving ourselves open. The analysis of Arsenal's defence is quite simple, really, in that it's fucking brilliant at the moment. And if you're 1-0 away from home and you have a defence like we have, and you have the organisation and the defensive discipline, which I think... I watched Match of the Day, and I think it was Micah Richards talking about it. It's not just the back four. It's not just the keeper. It is the entire team. There's a discipline, defensive discipline sort of baked into these players now, which means that as a team, we are really, really, really tough to break down and to create good chances against. If you look at the stats, again, the XG, not great. As you said, 2 games in a row, I think, where we haven't allowed the opposition a shot on target, which I think is the first time since the Invincible season. Is that right? Is that what an Orbinho stat? I think it was.
Could well be.
No big chances for Fulham. In statistical terms anyway. Did you feel like, despite the fact that 1-0 is always a bit of a kind of knife edge scoreline, did you feel comfortable that this was a game Arsenal could see out? Like, compared to, go back a season or a couple of seasons where, I can remember 1-0 games, or games certainly where we had a 1-goal lead going into the last 10, 15 minutes, where I was more on edge than I was on Saturday, I have to say.
Yeah. I think, obviously, you're wary of saying this because of the hubris attached to it. But in honesty, when Leandro Trossard bundled that ball in at the back post, I kind of thought that's game over. I really did. I just thought this Arsenal team are so structurally sound and so serious and so focused at this point in time that I was very confident they would see it over the line. Probably that confidence increased even more maybe when Mikel Merino trots on 4 minutes later, and I'm like, yeah, Mikel sees this as a 1-goal game, and he will make it so. And actually, the changes, I think, tell you that. I mean, Martinelli came on for Trossard with 10 minutes to go. Martinelli, I think, is probably more defensively sound than Trossard. Yeah. A better runner going in that direction as well. And then even in stoppage time, he brings off Viktor Gyokeres and gives I think a Premier League debut to Christian Norgard, defensive midfield player. So, he didn't change the back four, kept it in place, didn't tinker with that at all. Brought on really sort of good, hard-working defensive players. And I think if Fulham lacks something, it is probably that cutting edge. They've got a lot of good players. I suppose they're sort of typified in some respects by Alex Iwobi, who I just think is a really lovely footballer who doesn't quite... he has improved in this respect, but isn't quite a goal scorer or, serial assister. So, I did feel pretty confident, to be honest. The sort of wild card, the joker in the pack, of course, is always Adama Traore, who whenever he comes on, you're like, well, either he's going to fire a series of shots out of the ground, or he might, 1 in 8 times do something special. Yeah,
I mean, I thought it was quite funny when he came on. The commentator said, and this is Adama Traore's 15th or 16th game against Arsenal, and he's never scored.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can remember games where I'm going like, oh, God, Adama Traore, he could be a bit of a handful here. And look, we know what he's about. He's very quick and very fast and very, very strong. But he never really seems to produce against us. There is that sort of jeopardy, isn't there, with a 1-goal lead? You never know, a mistake, a
foul
set
in the box,
piece.
anything,
yeah, exactly.
A bad referee decision.
Something deemed to be a foul in the box.
Something
even.
Spectacular, can always happen. But I felt about as secure as I could feel.
Yeah.
And there were moments, as you said, with Gyokeres, with Martinelli, where we might have extended that lead and made it a bit more comfortable. But I think I'm trying to think back to those final few minutes. I don't think it was particularly uncomfortable at any point. Really.
No, I don't think so. They had there was 8-9 minutes at the end as well. But whatever they tried to do, we handled it. They tried to get forward. We were defensively so well organised they couldn't find a way through. There was a moment even at the end as well. I think Zubimendi went through and tried a cutback where I think he probably should have had a shot, which could have really sealed the game. So I think realistically, Arsenal were more likely to score again than Fulham were to get an equaliser, to be honest. That was my
reaction
thinking.
I described of sort of when we got the goal off the set piece, thinking like the game is done. I don't think players are immune from that feeling either. Like I imagine if you're Fulham, if you're one of those Fulham players, as professional as you are and as much as you have confidence in your own ability, you know the reputation of this Arsenal team. And did they really have the level of conviction or belief that they would get a goal here?
Yeah.
I'm not convinced they did. I sort of felt like they knew as well to a certain extent. And I think that you earn that. You earn that by your performances, your record, your reputation, your standing. And Arsenal have reached that point where there is a kind of inevitability about them when they get in front.
I think that's a great point, and maybe we can tie it into the discussion about set pieces in part two, because I think it is linked, to be honest. But I did want to go back to Saka, and there's sometimes there are performances from a player where even though they don't score or they don't get an assist, you're going, oh, okay, I see what's happening here now. And Saka, he's had an injury hit few months, hasn't he, towards the end of last season, and certainly the start of this season has had a hamstring issue, and he's missed a few weeks, and it's not ideal. But I looked at that performance and I looked at the intent with which he played, particularly in the second half, and I thought, okay, Bukayo Saka is feeling himself again. This feels more like the old, in inverted commas, Bukayo Saka, old, given that he's 24 still, but there were aspects to his game and to the way that he was taking on players, to the way that he was just relentless in trying to make something happen. When you look at the stats, where have I got them here? I definitely had them there a second ago. I think it's 6 key passes, 2 shots, 1 shot on target, 6 dribbles, fouled 5 times. Sessegnon kept fouling and didn't get a yellow card, because you don't get a yellow card when you foul Bukayo Saka. 14 crosses. There is, just as we've often discussed about him, a volume level of product, which often leads to end product. And I thought it was really, really interesting the way that he played, particularly in that second half, where he kind of knew somebody had to up the level a little bit for Arsenal to win the game. He upped the level with his set pieces, but in open play, the way he was trying to make things happen was really, really impressive. And I don't think Fulham could live with him, really. I don't think there was a player on the pitch who came as close to being as good as Bukayo Saka. Maybe Ricardo Calafiori in the first half, but in the second half, Saka was a cut above everybody else.
Yeah, he looks back to his best. And if you look at his last 5 appearances across Arsenal and England, goal against Olympiacos, goal against West Ham, goal for England against Wales, assist for England against Latvia, and then the Fulham game in which he was sensational and might well have had a goal or an assist if you count it as one, had that penalty stood. So
pre-assist, he got a nice Hleby pre-assist from the corner as well.
You're right, and if Gyokeres puts, I think both those chances in each half were set up by Saka in the right-hand channel. So
the Calafiori one was set up by Saka as well. The volley over the bar was set up by Saka. So,
and I think when he's at his very best, when he's really flying, he is basically good for a goal or an assist in every game. I think when he is on top of his game, he produces at that level, and he is at the moment. So I thought he was fantastic. And I think we've been so blessed, by the way, on that right-hand side this season. When Saka was out, we were here singing the praises of Noni Madueke. And now, with respect to Noni, you kind of forget that we ever had him, because Bukayo Saka's back and he's doing his thing. And the way in which we've been able to maintain consistency on that flank, despite both players suffering with significant injuries, is, I think, real vindication of the work that was done in the market.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my gut feeling on this season and our title chances or chances of success is, listen, I love what we're doing defensively. I think it's amazing. And I think it's an incredible foundation on which to base a title challenge, a Champions League tilt, a competitive team. There's no two ways about that. But I think if this is the season where we are to go the distance and lift a big trophy, someone like Bukayo Saka is gonna, not that he has to do it, but someone like Bukayo Saka will do something, incredible in terms of goals and assists over the course of the season, because I think you really do need one player. Like we're spreading the goals around in the Premier League, et cetera, and that's good. But I think you need one player, or maybe 2 players, to sort of exist in a higher stratosphere, if that's the right way of putting it. And when I think about the players that we have at our disposal, he is certainly one of the most likely candidates in that regard. So that's why I looked at that performance on Saturday and thought, oh, yeah, I like this. I like where this is going, what the potential is if Bukayo Saka can hit this level and then maintain that level consistently. Like, I'm not saying he's got to play brilliantly every single week, but if we get him into that run of form, and certainly he's in the mindset where he's in that run of form, I think those are the things that sort of win you the points, that elevate you above the other very good teams and help you win titles.
Yeah, absolutely. And he was a cut above on Saturday, so I'm really excited by what we might see from him moving forward. Okay.
Anything else on the game, on the performance? I think it's just one of those where, in the in the first half of the season, you sort of look back on on games like this. I think they are foundational to success, by the way, you know. Typically teams, I think, who go on to win a title or challenge for a title find their best form and their best rhythm in the second half of the season. But you've got to win these games. These are games where you've got to turn up and take the points and just sort of not routine, because I think that is too dismissive of a Fulham side that have been very good and certainly a tricky side for us to take points against at Craven Cottage over the last couple of years. But it is one of those where you look back at it and go, okay, not a lot of fuss, but job done, and we've got those 3 points under our belt.
Yeah, and I think it's another big weekend, another really strong weekend for Arsenal. You look at that gap to Liverpool. You know, what is it? 4 points now. Stays at 4 points. Might have been even bigger were it not for an absolute wonder goal from Szoboszlai.
Yeah. Not too long ago that we could have feasibly been 8 points behind Liverpool. And now we're 4 ahead, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose that's a little kind of warning shot as well, that things can change quickly. But
for sure.
Now you have to say it looks incredibly positive and an exciting week to come, because there's a big game right around the corner on Tuesday night against
for sure.
Atletico, and then obviously the weekend. So yeah, Palace we've got, right, who had a crazy old game themselves.
Wow. Yeah, amazing. We'll cross those bridges when we come to them. So let's leave it there for part 1. We will come back with your questions and more in part 2 right after this. Welcome back to the Arsecast Extra. This is part 2 of the show where we answer the questions that you sent to us on Blue Sky at gunnerblog.bsky.social, also at arseblog.com, and also on the Arseblog Discord chat server, which you get access to if you are an Arseblog member on Patreon. So let's start with a question about set pieces and Arsenal scoring again from a set piece and winning a game. And so Arsenal Cannon Picks says, on a scale of I don't give a fuck and I couldn't care less, where do you stand on Arne Slot and rival fans' comments on our set piece goals? It seems we are boiling a lot of people's piss by being really good at a fundamental part of the game.
I don't care about Arne Slot's comments, or indeed the sort of the kind of aesthetic criticism of other fans doesn't bother me particularly. I do think that we have perhaps learned or seen in each of the last 2 years when, lest we forget, we have also been very good at attacking set pieces. I do think we have experienced a fact that can kind of run dry, that it's not necessarily sustainable over the course of an entire campaign, and that, you know, it's dangerous to rely on it. So that's the only respect in which I care. Like, I think clearly it's a huge weapon for us, and clearly it's a difference maker, and it can break open games, and we owe it a lot already this season. I think history shows us that to get over the line, we probably will need more, and we'll probably need our attacking game to click in a way that I'm not sure it quite has consistently this season. There's certainly been games or moments when it has, but I'm not sure we've, you know, produced it week in, week out. I think we may have to get there to be champions. And that's kind of where I'm at with it. What about yourself?
I don't disagree with that, actually. I do think that there is, you know, a need to improve in other areas. But in the meantime, you know, while we're waiting for those things to click, whether it's, you know, attacking patterns or indeed other players, perhaps, I think this is an amazing thing to have at our disposal. You know, I remember Arteta last season. It's one of those things managers say, and it probably comes back to bite them in the arse a little bit. But I don't know how anybody could really argue with the ambition of it. He said, we want to be the best in the world at everything. Whether it's set pieces, whether it's free kicks, whether it's scoring goals from open play, whatever it is, we want to be the best in the world at everything. That's tough, I think that's a really tough thing to achieve. But maybe what we have achieved right now is being the best team in the world at scoring from corners and set pieces. And it's not because, we're lucky or just because we've got big guys. Lots of teams have big guys. We've got players who are, extremely proficient in the opposition box through training and, working on these things. It comes from hard work. It's not by accident at all. And I think as well, maybe to sort of take it in a different direction, I was having a conversation with somebody on Blue Sky the other day, and I can't remember. I think his name was Damo. I can't find the things now while we're recording, but it's sort of about how crucial set pieces are to us when we're facing teams who very deliberately set up to deny us attacking space, or as we saw against Fulham on Saturday, the way that we play and the fact that they sort of sit back into a deep block means it's difficult to break them down. Therefore, corners become really, really important in cracking a game open. There's maybe a scenario in this game where, we score in whatever it is, 58th minute. Fulham decide, right, we've got to come out and play a bit more. Maybe we leave an Eze on the pitch and we've got a bit more in the final third to carve Fulham open and create a few chances, So I do think there is something interesting in that aspect as well, that when games are tight and when you're a team like Arsenal, who I think now everybody, when they go to play Arsenal, will say they're a very good team. We have to respect the quality that they have, and we're going to make it as difficult as we can for them in every aspect of the game. That having this as a sort of, superpower is really, really important at this moment in the season because, like you say, we are waiting for other things to click and to gel and to mesh and for those attacking units to really deliver what I think they can. I think there is definite room for improvement from open play. But while we're doing that, having come through a summer where we've added 8 new players and we're, betting in a new striker who doesn't have any alternative at this moment in time, so we're asking a lot of him. Odegaard's not there. Eze himself is maybe having to learn to play in a slightly different way because of the way teams set up against Arsenal. I think this is really, really important. Really important. So I get it. I think we do have to improve. There are going to be times where we go through a period where we're not going to score from a corner and we'll go a while without doing that. But for now, it's really helping. And like I said, it's no accident.
No. I mean, it's interesting you used the word superpower there. What are Arsenal's superpowers? I would say set pieces, absolutely. And probably the out of possession stuff. Probably the defensive shape, solidity, commitment, athleticism. I think we want to be the best at everything. What are we the best at? We are the best at set pieces, certainly in the attacking half, and we are probably the best defensive team, the best out of possession team, potentially in European football. I'd say certainly in English football. So, and funnily enough, those are the things that we're criticised for, but they may well be the kind of foundational pillars of Arsenal's title challenge this season.
Yeah.
And I think if they're attracting criticism or jibes, you can be sure if they're coming from opposition fans, it's because they feel threatened by that or worried by that.
Yeah.
One thing by the way, as well, I think we're trendsetters. I really strongly believe that. I mean, managers have been talking this season about set pieces being back. The return of the long throw, the percentage of goals being scored from dead ball situations is up across the league. And I firmly believe that comes from other clubs looking at what Arsenal are doing and seeking to emulate.
Agree.
And realising that there is not an easy route to goal, but a whole element of the game that has perhaps not been sufficiently mined and exploited.
Yes.
And I think Arsenal are ahead of most in that respect. I think other clubs like Brentford, for example, have been really innovative, and Arsenal have taken a lot from Brentford.
Yeah, we took their set piece coach for a start, didn't we?
Exactly,
back in the day.
They've taken 2 set piece coaches from them because they Jover was there at one time before he went to City, and then Andres Jorgensen was at Brentford too. We took our goalkeeper coach from Brentford. I mean, Brentford as a model for Mikel Arteta's kind of coaching strategy and implementation at Arsenal is a really fascinating topic because they've lifted a lot and they've copied a lot. So I'm not saying we're unique or special, but I think with the tools at our disposal, the resource at our disposal, the players at our disposal, we have become the leading club at this, and I think others are now trying to catch up.
Do you think there's something, in the whole discussion about, set pieces maybe were viewed as the purview of less talented coaches?
Yeah.
That it was a way to try and equalize against teams where, if it was back in the day, if it was Bolton against Manchester United in terms of quality on the pitch would have had far more, right?
Yeah.
But Bolton as a way to try and threaten superior opposition, I think there's no other way of putting it, would focus on things like corners, set pieces, long throws. How do you put these guys under pressure? How can you capitalize from these moments? So they're sort of associated with these coaches who are maybe viewed as industrial, maybe a bit dinosaur, etc., etc. I think there's something fascinating about the way that football these days is discussed about how prescribed everything is, how every aspect of the game is maybe overcoached, hypercoached. I don't know what way you want to put it. I don't want to go down the road of like, is the era of the expressionist gone? Where does a Ronaldinho fit into the modern game? That kind of thing, right? But do you think set pieces are now losing that element of snobbery, that there is a pragmatism with which everyone in football is looking and saying, actually, why wouldn't we try and be as effective as possible from corners? Why wouldn't we try and maximize our throw-ins? If we've got a guy who can throw the ball under the opposition crossbar from, inside the opposition half, why wouldn't we try and do that, regardless of how people view it from an aesthetic point of view, or, is it something to look down your nose at? I don't think it is. I really don't. But I know that there are people out there who will think, well, that's how many times have you seen the Mikel Arteta, Tony Pulis meme thing going around, Which, I get it. But we just fucking won a game at the weekend because we're really good at this.
Yeah, I mean, listen, maybe there is that kind of old purist idea of, open play being the superior way to go. And I don't doubt Arsene Wenger, subscribed to that to a certain extent. And that was part of the kind of ideological battle that he and Pulis, for example, waged over the years. I do think that, it's the domain of clubs. Historically, it's been the domain of clubs who are maybe lower down the table, looking to kind of claw something back. But actually, what do Arsenal have? They have great headers of the ball and size and athleticism and all those things, but they also have two tricky wing players on the pitch, usually. They also are facing teams that are in a low block, that are difficult to break down. Where does the ball circulate to? Where does the ball arrive? It arrives at those wide players. That means they're going to get corners. Mm-hmm. They're going to get 8, 9, 10, 11 corners per game. It's not like your Stokes or your Burnleys or whoever who might have a handful of set-piece opportunities they're trying or hoping to get lucky on. Arsenal create corners, and the way in which the team play is going to generate those opportunities. So if you can really maximise the threat in those scenarios, and this comes back to what we we're talking about in part one, about the sort of slight sense of inevitability, the tension, the pressure that ramps up when Arsenal have a corner. We had a question saying, can we get on with it more at set pieces? We take too long, we're too slow when we need a goal. I think that misses the point entirely. I think Arsenal are amplifying that pressure, that tension. I think they are exhausting and wearing teams out with it. And I think there is that growing sense of inevitability that if Arsenal get enough corners, they will probably score. So I think it's a solution that Mikel Arteta has found to a problem that we have. And I think it's one that is proving to be really effective. I don't think it's one we can afford to turn our noses up at or should turn our noses up at. And I don't think opposition can afford to turn their noses up at it either. And I think we're seeing that now across the league. So I think it's really interesting. And yeah, I think it just comes back to that same point of coaches these days, and Arteta's foremost among this, really mining every possible opportunity for any margin they can find.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Here was a question about set pieces that I thought was kind of interesting, giving it the big sell there, from Jeremy at Jezza81 on Blue Sky. And Jeremy said, "Good morning, gents. Until the goal, I thought Saka's corner deliveries weren't as good as usual." Well, so did he. The lack of space by the corner flag in Craven Cottage felt like a factor to me. I remember some teams bringing advertising boards close to the pitch to try and stop Rory Delap's long throws. How long do you think it will take for teams to try the corner flag in attempts to disrupt our corner routines and deliveries?
Well, listen,
very short piece of turf, wasn't it, by the flag?
Yeah, it did look like there was a short run-up. It's only like in five-a-side where you're allowed a one-step penalty.
Yeah.
It felt a bit like a one-step corner, which is probably why one or two of those deliveries weren't as good. Listen, if a football club decides that the way to stop Arsenal taking good corners is to move the entire stand a little bit closer to the pitch, then fair fucks, But I do think those are things that probably, I would imagine in the preparation for a game like this, that every aspect of our set piece prowess is taken into account. So is there going to be a shorter run-up for taking corners at Craven Cottage? Yeah. So when we're practicing corners from set pieces in the week before we play Fulham, is that something they do? You probably think so, right? If the attention to detail with which we prepare for our games and everything else, it might be part of why it was more difficult, because you get a few extra steps and it's easier to take a good corner if you've got a couple of steps as a run-up. But maybe it took Saka just a few goes to find his range. And when he did, bang.
Bang indeed.
Bang
Over
indeed.
to you.
I had one here from fogginastandard.atx on the Discord. He says, "Goodly morning, gents. Trossard has been the subject of a lot of criticism lately, but it's undeniable that he has a knack of getting goal contributions when we need them the most. Is there an element of right place, right time at play, or are there tangible qualities to Trossard's game that you think are going unnoticed?"
I called him a poacher, didn't I, in part one? And I think that's what he is. I think a bit like, and I'm going to invoke the name of an Arsenal legend here, and I'm not saying that Trossard is the same level, but a bit like a Robert Pires or a Freddie Ljungberg, his timing and his finishing are of a really, really high standard. And it's interesting because in the summer, I remember doing the story about his contract pay rise. And man, oh man, people were not happy about that. I know that that's because there are certain deals that hadn't been done and people had concerns about the business and the summer is mental. But there was a lot of hate out there. How representative that is of people's true feelings, you never really know. But I think already this season, he's demonstrated that he has a part to play. My understanding is Mikel Arteta always wanted him to stay and was one of the people really advocating for him to get that pay rise. He felt he earned it, felt it was important to keep him happy. And he repays that faith. I know he can be a frustrating player at times because he has these great moments and you feel like, can he produce that level of threat across 90 minutes? But I almost think that's sort of asking him to be something he's not. I think he is. I think he's a finisher. I think he's just a really, really good finisher.
Yeah.
And, he hovers at that back post and, look, it's not exactly a clean strike that he buries it with, but he just has the instincts. And I think that's an attribute that's hard to define. It doesn't really show up, on stats too easily. But the goal record speaks for itself.
Yeah, agree completely. There's nothing that you're looking at in the stats and going, oh yeah, the underlying this or the whatever of Trossard tells us X, Y, and Z. It's the goal record, though. It is the fact that he has got end product and he's got experience and he knows kind of what's what. I mean, I went back because I remember having a discussion about this on one of the earlier episodes. This is sort of mid-September, I think, from a previous Arsecast Extra when Trossard was being linked with a move to Turkey. And this was after the transfer window had closed in England. I was quite surprised by how many people were like, yeah, take the money. Take the money for Trossard. We've got to take the money. And I'm like, what the fuck good is 20 million euros now to Arsenal between now and January? Well, I mean, genuinely, listen, maybe the accountants have a different view on this than I would, and that's fine. But
yeah, they may do, I think.
I think they might well do. But, when you look at the schedule, you look at the games, you look at the competitions we're going to be in, Leandro Trossard is far more useful to Arsenal than any amount of money that we're probably not going to be able to spend until next summer anyway.
Fuck the accountants is what we're saying.
Fuck the accountants. Absolutely. Fuck the bank balance. Legs on the pitch score goals and money in the bank really doesn't. And I think Trossard so far this season has demonstrated why we should keep him. Does that mean that there's not a discussion to be had about, going forward, what we might do on the left-hand side? Sure. Absolutely. I think that's a perfectly valid discussion, but I'd much rather have Leandro Trossard than not this season, Yeah. I think...
Yeah, I mean, if I told people in April or May how many games Trossard would be starting on the left wing in the early period of this season, they would have lost their minds. And if I'd followed it up with, and we'll be top, and going well in the Champions League, then I think there probably would have been some surprise there. But I've always liked him, rated him. And I know there is this idea of he's better off the bench. I think a lot of attackers are. Because I think invariably you're coming on in scenarios that sort of suit you. You're either that you're chasing a goal and the team are really going for it and, you're playing in a really attacking way, so you're going to be heavily involved, or you're coming up against a team who themselves are chasing a goal and there's more space and more opportunity to counter-attack on them. I don't doubt he's a good sub, but I just think in general he's got a real nose for goal and he can be a match winner.
Yes, as he was on Saturday. 9 games this season, 3 goals, 2 assists. So 5 goal involvements in 9 games. Very, very decent. And listen, I do get some of the frustration around Trossard generally. Sometimes he can flit in and out of a game and maybe what you're looking for in certain aspects or certain times of the game from a left winger isn't what he brings you. So I do get that frustration, but, he can come up clutch with goals. And I think the experience he has as well is really, really important in this team. So, yeah. And you say it wasn't the cleanest strike to put it over the net or put it in the back of the net, but it was quick reactions, quick instincts to sort of just get his knee on it and bundle it over. It doesn't matter really how clean a strike it is. That's a chance that maybe if a player is on his heels, it goes the other way, So I think he deserves a lot of credit for the goal he scored.
We had this question I thought was interesting from Gordon, who said, what do you think of the relatively poor / indifferent form of Isak, Wirtz, Gyokeres, and to an extent Eze? Is it just hard for new players to hit top form? Is there any difference between so-called Premier League ready players such as Eze and Isak and players from other leagues such as Ekitike and Zubamendi?
I mean, I suppose if you were going to draw a line or any kind of through line between Gyokeres and Isak, it would be the fact that both of them had truncated pre-seasons, right? Because of the situations that they were involved with, Isak going on strike at Newcastle and Gyokeres doing something similar, I think, with Sporting, but I think it was a slightly more... I understood it slightly more from his perspective, right? His situation was sorted earlier than Isak. Isak really didn't have much of a preseason at all, apart from training on his own. I don't think that's ideal. So maybe you could draw a through line there between those two.
Yeah, maybe.
Wirtz, I don't really know. He's one of those players who was, outstanding in the Bundesliga. Just hasn't quite got up to speed yet at Liverpool, and maybe not all is as well at Liverpool as some might say. And Eze, I think that's quite interesting as well, because we did have another question. Let me see if I can find it here. Let me see. I did have one.
I've got one if you want one.
Well, there's one here from Wise Marklar who says, is Eze a square peg in a round hole? I'm one of his biggest supporters, but he's done very little since joining, and I find the difference between how he's being criticised compared to Gyokeres quite interesting. But there was another question that I had, and it might have been on Blue Sky, I can't find it, but it was basically about, is Eze having to adapt to a team that is maybe more dominant than Crystal Palace? Yeah,
there were a couple of questions here from JW Stern. So far, I'm not convinced with Eze as a right-sided midfielder. Would we be better with him on the left and Ranieri in the Odegaard spot? Mbayella said, what's your reading of Eze through the middle so far? To me, he looks like someone who'll need a sizable number of games to be a genuine Odegaard replacement. Yeah,
there was this one from Sam Ellman, who's at Kuselman, I think, on bsky.social. He looks a bit out of his depth. Do you think this is because he's not used to playing the right 8 role, because he typically plays on the left, which is true? Or is it because he's rarely had to play against low block teams? And I think there's probably something to both of those things, to be honest. I thought Eze, by the way, was great against Newcastle. I thought he was really, really good against Newcastle when he was played there. So I just think players can take time to adapt to a new team, to new surroundings, to a new way of facing opposition. I think there probably is something to that. Palace play in a very specific way, but are Palace going to dominate games with 65, 68% possession? Not typically, not usually. So there is something to learn, isn't there, when you're in a team that's facing a side that is sitting deep with 11 men behind the ball. There's no question Eze has huge creativity and craft, but it's difficult for even the most creative players to find a way through, So I think it's just a question of time for me on all of these guys. I don't know about Isak or Wirtz. I hope they never come good, obviously, for Liverpool. And Gyokeres, I think, as long as he doesn't score, I think the conversations around him are going to persist. Even if there were things about his game on Saturday that I thought were positive, a greater willingness to sort of pull the trigger in certain moments. But other aspects where I look at him and think, can he really improve in that aspect of his game? Like the first touch sometimes is just a bit heavy, and I'm not sure what you can do about that when a player gets to 27. So that is something we're probably going to have to learn to live with a bit. But I think it is tied to, putting the ball in the back of the net, and nobody will really talk too much about his first touch. When he doesn't score, that is going to be a topic of conversation.
And I think the question sort of suggests this, really. I think they're all individual cases. Like, it's tempting to try and apply hard and fast rules. Like, Premier League players adapt quicker. And I think, in general, that proves to be the case. But then you look at someone like Zubimendi, come in, never played in England, looks like he's barely missed a beat, right? Adapted within a couple of games. I don't think Eze's been too bad, to be honest with you. I know he's maybe not sort of lit up things in the last couple of games in the way that you might expect, but I do think he's learning a new role. I think he still had big moments. notably against Man City, of course.
I mean, just to give credit where it's due, it's him trying to link up with Gyokeres that leads to the corner that we score the goal from on Saturday.
And I think as well, what you get with a Premier League player is like whatever he may be having to adapt to tactically, he knows the league, he knows the intensity, he knows the physicality, he knows the grounds. Do you know what I mean? Like I do think there is a value in that. Isak and Wirtz, yeah. I mean, it's funny enough, when you look around the league at sort of the really big deals, Isak, Wirtz, Gyokeres, Sesko, and Burmo, I know he scored at Anfield, Cunha, Xavi Simons. Who has really produced? I mean, the obvious answer is probably Voltemade at Newcastle.
Oh, God, what a goal. This weekend, fucking hell.
Yeah, the German Crouch is delivering, right? He's hit the ground running. But aside from that, the big deals, haven't Ekitike did, but now he finds himself out of the team as they try and accommodate Isak. So, yeah, look, long may those problems continue. Alanga's not caught light at Newcastle. So maybe it does just take a bit of time. I think there's individual reasons, and every case has to be assessed differently. It's sort of the boring answer.
Yeah.
Can I ask you this one?
Of course.
It's actually two, so
All
sorry
right.
about that.
That's okay.
So Damien McBride says, if a magic genie granted you a wish to finish above one club this season, who right now would you choose? And Nathan, just to throw into the mix, says, have we let our eye casually wander off City as a title threat? I feel they may have had one down year, but are just as much a contender as the 7 seasons prior.
I will say that I never dismissed Manchester City's title hopes or capabilities this season. Not for a bit.
Who are you going to go for the one team? Bournemouth, maybe?
I will say Man City. City. Yeah, I think, they have an amazing squad. They spent a lot of money in January. They spent a lot of money in the summer as well. And they have a ridiculous striker. It's absurd what he is doing. What was it? I watching Match of the Day the other day. 8 league games, and Erling Haaland is in double figures for goals. This is the 3rd time he has been in double figures for goals in the Premier League after 8 games. That's what the fuck, like. It's ridiculous. Like, you could make the argument, of course, that Manchester City are too dependent on the goals of Erling Haaland, because he scores so many of their goals, which is true, I think. But as long as he's doing it, and the fucker seems pretty much indestructible physically. So as long as he's doing that and producing goals with the frequency and regularity with which he does, then they are going to be a huge title threat, I think. And I think with the experience they have, with the quality they have, in the squad, the depth of the squad, and the manager they have, anyone who sort of thinks Manchester City are also Rans is living in a fucking cloud cuckoo land, to be honest. And I genuinely think if we're going to win the title, we're going to have to finish above Man City. That would be my guess. What did he say? A magic sandwich?
Who? Sorry?
Was that the question?
No.
Or did I
don't
read
think
that?
So. I think he said a magic genie. If
Right.
a magic genie granted you a wish. Are you hungry, Andrew? Because there was no mention of a sandwich.
I actually confess I am a little bit hungry, and my mind might have been going, I was going a magic sandwich. That's brilliant. You get something tasty to eat, and it gives you a bonus. Yeah.
I think today, this morning, you have to say City, don't you?
Yeah, I think so.
Like, Liverpool are beset with issues. They're losing games left, right, and centre. And I just think Haaland alone, to be honest with you, is enough for me to think they are a massive threat. I'm looking at the Premier League top goal scorers chart in as much as it is worthwhile, and it's totally absurd. Haaland has 11. Semenyo has 6, which is great. I mean, he is in the form of his life, right? And he's not a conventional centre forward. Then you're looking at Mateta, who scored a hat-trick on Saturday to get him to 5. Without that, he wouldn't be in the running. And then after that, you're looking at people who are on 4 goals. People like Voltemada, Anthony at Burnley, Danny Welbeck, who I still love as a player, by the way.
Yeah.
Was himself at the weekend.
He's having a lovely little
Indian summer, isn't it?
Yeah.
He's a really good footballer. Igor Thiago, they're miles off. Barring an injury, he's going to absolutely walk the Golden Boot.
He's played 10 games this season and scored 14 goals.
Yeah, it is weird. Yeah.
You know what, though? I think something people don't necessarily talk about when it comes to Haaland is that, when he first came to Man City, it was like, he is not as good as these guys, technically. The way City had the Silvas, De Bruyne's, Mahrez, these kind of brilliant technical players. And Haaland felt like it's ridiculous to say, a square peg in a round hole, to go back to what was said about Eze there, but
a bit of a blunt instrument.
A blunt instrument. Like, he was at odds with what you expect the Manchester City philosophy to be and the kind of players that they buy. I will say that over the course of his time at Manchester City, technically, I think he has improved massively. So not only is he now, or as he always was, a ridiculously prolific goal scorer, I think the technical level of his game is far better, and I think his game intelligence is way beyond what it was, which is kind of scary. And he is carrying Manchester City to an extent, but again, as long as he does that, Barcelona with Messi, Real Madrid with Cristiano Ronaldo,
gives you a chance.
These guys exist on a different plane, and as long as they're there and as long as they're in the team, everyone else has got to work so hard to keep up. So I think City are the ones, yeah.
And we've not gone big on Viktor in this episode because, frankly, I don't think we could do it every week, and as long as he doesn't score, that debate's going to keep being there. But is that, you mentioned Haaland's improvement. He was 21 when he joined City. Is the fact that Gyokeres is 27 now, is that what gives you that slight concern that maybe some of those rough edges are less likely to be smoothed out?
Yeah. I don't think it's impossible that he can improve. I'm not saying that he is what he is, forever and ever and ever. I think all players can improve and they can add facets to their game and they can work on things which make them more effective as footballers. But I do think once you get to about 27, you're not going to get a whole lot more out of a player on a technical level. Can they produce? Yes. Can they hit runs of form? Absolutely. But I think certain limitations within their game are probably always going to be there, albeit you can work on some of those and make them make the edges less rough. Is that the best way of putting it?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Here's a question from jumppunchkick.bsky.social, which is that a Newcastle account? Anyway, he says, or they say, our defensive record has been brilliant this season, but I've not heard much about Gabriel Heinze's input on this. Has he been the extra piece to get the best out of our already excellent defence?
Great question. And I think wouldn't surprise me if Mikel Arteta is asked about that very soon. I'm not at all the press conferences at the moment because I'm filming, but if I was, I have a little notes file on my phone of things to ask Mikel about. And I've sort of been waiting for an opportunity to do that on his impact. I remember when we were in Asia, in some of the sort of open training sessions or pre-game drills, you could see him working with the back four, often working with the left backs, actually. Did spend time with Calafiori and Miles Lewis-Skelly. Simple stuff like sort of dealing with diagonals into the corner, playing the offside trap, moving back into position. I mean, he is a defender by trade. That was his life. That was his livelihood, and he was very good at it as well. So I think it's always dangerous to kind of correlate the type of player with the type of coach. Arsene Wenger himself was a defensive midfield player, but he might have had an impact. Why not? He's got a wealth of experience.
Yeah.
And I actually think even if it's not sort of the technical side of things or the tactical side of things, you can be pretty sure what his mentality will be.
Yeah.
And I think he may have instilled some of that, probably just reinforced things that were already there in Arteta's approach and in his coaching team. But the decision to appoint Heinze suggests maybe that Mikel was always minded to lean into those strengths rather than, it's not like he brought in someone who'd been an elite attacker.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's this publication, you might have heard of it, it's called The Athletic.
Yeah, I don't read it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, don't blame you. But anyway, they had an interview with Christian Mosquera during the international break.
Yeah.
And he actually talked about Gabriel Heinze and said he has a certain aggressiveness, that spirit that is so typical of centre-backs, and he is helping us defenders improve a lot. On top of that, he is Argentinian, and he's helping me to compete. So I think there is an intimation there that some of that South American feistiness, for want of a better word, is part of what Gabriel Heinze is bringing to the defensive side of our game. And listen, I'm not averse to that at all. And I think our defensive record, it would be too reductive to say, the defensive record this season, which, by the way, is the best in the club's entire history after 10 games or 11 games or whatever it is, right, is down to Gabriel Heinze and what he's doing. I think it's a lot to do with the collective. It's a lot to do with the quality of the defenders that we've got at our disposal and the form that they're in and the way that they're playing, etc., etc. But if there is something that gives you an extra 1%, 2% over the course of a season, it might be the difference between 1, 2, 3, 4 goals in games where, the 1 goal margin is the difference between 1 point and 3 points.
And I think the chemistry between a coach and a player is hard to anticipate, hard to predict, but can be so important. I remember back in the summer after Heinze had been here for a few weeks, chatting with somebody, and they were like, Gabriel loves him. Do you know what I mean? And you can absolutely see that. Like, you speak about that kind of South American classic tenacity. They have that in common, that competitive spirit. And if that kind of brings that more out of Gabriel on the pitch, then fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm also curious, by the way, that, Gabriel Heinze played a lot of his football as a left back, and there's been a change at left back this season, with Calafiori starting the majority of games ahead of Miles Lewis-Skelly. I'd love to be a fly on the wall for those conversations between Gabriel Heinze and Mikel Arteta. And I wonder to what extent Heinze's instincts or preferences might be part of that. I know Mikel Arteta's his own man, but it would be odd if Heinze didn't have a role in that. So
yeah,
I think he's certainly had an impact, and maybe just gives Mikel Arteta that sense of assurance and confidence that he needs. I mean, this is a guy who first and foremost has been a friend to Mikel for a very, very, very long time. I know he thinks very highly of him and his football knowledge, but he is a confidant and an ally, and that has real value to the manager too. Yeah.
I think it's probably a good job that both of those men work in football. That's all I got to say.
Good job for the rest of the world, you mean?
Yeah, essentially, yes.
And at least they're in one place now. Do you know what I mean?
Well, exactly, yeah.
We know where they are. You've got to bring your own water bottle.
They're conspiring to make things better for Arsenal, which can only be a good
against
thing.
You.
No, absolutely not. Right. I think we better leave it there for this particular episode. There is, of course, a big game tomorrow evening, James. Atletico Madrid at home in the Champions League. Tough one.
End-to-end thriller, no doubt.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've seen all the memes doing the rounds. I mean, Simeone versus Arteta. It is one of those, unstoppable force, immovable. Well, it's a movable object versus a movable object, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the way it goes.
Maybe it will surprise us.
Maybe so. It's mad to think we've only played Atletico once in competitive terms. So it will be very interesting to see what way Arteta approaches it at home, what way, I think we know what way Simeone is going to approach it, but listen, they've got some great attacking talent as well, Atletico Madrid. So, the perception that they're just about defending is not correct. So I think this could be very interesting.
Corners versus Julian Alvarez's free kick.
Yeah, don't give him any. That would be my recommendation. Anyway, we'll talk a bit more about the Atletico Madrid game on Patreon. Tomorrow we'll have a quick Atletico Madrid preview podcast for you tomorrow morning because Mikel Arteta meets the press, I think, later this afternoon. So with all that information and all the preview stuff, we'll do a little bit of a preview podcast on Patreon. We'll have the 30 for you this afternoon, looking back at all the fun weekend's Premier League action. If you want to join up, it's patreon.com/Arseblog to get instant access to that and everything else that we do on Patreon and all the other benefits that come with it. For now, though, take it easy, folks, and we will catch you on the next one.
Bye-bye.